preach a sermon entitled, Many People Never Get This. Many people never get this truth, and it's sort of, I don't think it's that difficult, but I know some people really struggle with this area, and Brian touched on it when he was talking about grace. He said, as hard as it is to believe, we can reject the grace of God. We can say no to God and what He has for us and how He wants to bless us. And why anybody would do that is sort of outside the realm, but we know people do it. Probably most of you know you've done it, and so that's one of the ways that we know that it's true is because I have said no to God. I have pushed God away, and I've said some other time. And I will tell you that the very fact that that's possible is a dangerous thing. The theological position that says grace is irresistible, I guess the flip side of what we're saying today, there is a theology that teaches that you can't say no to God. And so if you can't say no to God, then when He comes to save you, you have no choice but to get saved. And I don't agree with that. And again, I use my own experience to tell you that I said no to God, and then after I said yes to God, I ran away anyway for fear. But I want you to realize today that you need to understand the truth that you should not be blaming God for things that He has not done. So we're gonna go with that, and I want to tell you first of all that how you believe about that makes a huge difference in your own mind, and I realize that. But I want to give you Jeremiah 29:11. We're going to just put some of these up because they're just single verses. But you know this. This is actually the New King James Version, not the NIV, that you know better. But let me give it to you. You read that. I'm going to give it to you in the NIV, all right? For I know the plans I have for you, saith the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. Now, that's the way we often quote that verse. And as you can see, it's very, very similar to the concept that is there. So let me say this to you. If today, if God's plan for your life is being carried out, how many of you would say, wow, what's God got against me? You know, if things maybe aren't going so great in your life, and you say, boy, God made this happen to me, we would have a reason to say, why do I want to serve God? Serve God, much less sit in a pew, because we would find a reason to blame God for everything. If you're not rich and happy, maybe it's just God's plan for you to be poor and miserable. I've known some people that I sure wondered about it, that they liked that. They just like, you know, you've heard the old saying, misery loves company. Man, I've known people that were sure miserable. I don't know about the company part. But if you believe that that's God's indictment against you, if that's God's condemnation operating in your life, man, it's going to be really hard for you to ever hear a message or sing a song about the love of God, because you're going to say that's for other people, but it's not for me. But I want to tell you today that if you believe that God does have a great plan for your life, and that you need to find out what that plan is and get to getting it, then that changes everything. You see, it matters how you believe about this. It matters what you believe. Now let's look at, we're going to compare two verses, Ephesians 5:17. Therefore, do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is. Would you agree with me that it requires some understanding to know the will of the Lord? Just like based on that verse. Do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is. Now let's look at James 1:22. Be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. You see, that verse, along with Ephesians 5:17, puts some responsibility on us. We can hear, we can say, God has a wonderful plan for my life, and that I'm trying to think of some really foolish way of making you understand this, and this is not good. I'm not supporting the lottery, but I think you'll get the point. There's a commercial on TV and these big bales of money fall out of the sky. How many of you have seen the commercial? So it like comes on Channel 13. I'm not asking you if you played the lottery. I'm just saying, have you seen this commercial? This man runs to the window and looks out, and his wife looks out, and she says, "Look, it's money, money everywhere." And she says, "Let's go get some of it." And he grabs her by the arm and says, "Wait, there's probably only about $15 million. Let's wait and see if more falls." And the woman says, "But 15 million's a lot of..." And right when she goes to say money, all these other people say money, and they rush in and gather up the money and run away with it. The point of the commercial is, play the lottery all the time. Don't wait for it to be 50 million. And if you're going to play the lottery, you know, I only play when those sweepstakes, when it gets up real high. Well, if you're hoping to win anything, I'd go ahead and play. If that's your deal, I'd rather see you put that dollar in the offering plate, because we can use it lots better than the state of Iowa, whatever they're going to do with it. But I'm not preaching on the lottery for sure. But do you understand the point? Now, let's put God's grace and salvation and plan for your life in front of you. You and your wife run to the window, throw the window open, and say, "Look, God's grace is all over the yard. Let's go get some of it." No, wait. Maybe there's more coming, and it'll be better to wait. It is a good commercial. It makes a great point. I just don't like the theory behind it. But when I see that God offers to us all the blessings of Himself, and we say, "Not now, wait a while," but we do. We do, and it's sort of insane to me. Now I want to make this really practical from the Bible. Matthew 21, 28 through 31. Jesus talking here. He says, "What do you think? What do you think? A man has 2 sons. He came to the first and said, 'Son, go work today in my vineyard.' And he answered and said, 'No, I'm not going to go.' But then he regretted it, and he went. Then he came to the second and said, likewise, 'Go work in my field.' And he answered, 'Yes, sir, I'm on my way.' But in reality didn't go. Now, which of the 2 did the will of the Father?" That's pretty easy, isn't it? Can I tell you that based on this little parable, Jesus very clearly says that God lets His will be known, and then His children get to decide whether or not we're going to do it. Is that what you get out of it? That's what I get out of it. We're talking about finding and doing the will of God. James says, "Don't be hearers only, be doers." And Paul wrote in the book of Ephesians and said, "Do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is." And Jesus Himself said, when you know the will of God, do it. Don't say "I will" and don't. Do it. This is, to me, very, very easy. But do you know how many people play the blame game? They blame God for things and say it must have been His will or it wouldn't have happened. I'm not going to take a lot of time there, but let me just touch on that. This is very common in churches and in people, and they'll say, "Well, I sure hope this turns out right." And then if it doesn't, they say, "Well, it must have been God's will." That's making an assumption that God's will is always done. Always. And I'm telling you that just based on the verse I just read, it isn't. Because the one son said, "I'll do it," but then he didn't go. God's will isn't always done just because He's God and He willed it. We have the ability to say no to God. And so, if something goes wrong and you say, "Well,